quick roll call just to make sure.
All right, so the October 21st, 2020 Wetlands Commission meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Shannon, if you want to get the roll call for us.
Sure. Dave Fox,
I'm here.
Bob Hannon,
I'm here.
Robert Eisner,
Here.
Mark Simpson,
Here.
Jay Tulin, Jay Tulin. Hey, look. Where are you? Oh, there he is. Jay, are you there? I can see him. Okay. Oh, I can see him and there's nothing in chat. We'll come back. Guy Wolf. Guy, you gotta unmute your phone. Guy Wolf.
Here.
Thank you. Ned Stachin. You gotta unmute yourself, Ned.
Here.
Thank you. I'm gonna try one more time. Jay Tulin. All right, I'm not sure, Bob. I can see him logged in. He may have just stepped away for a moment, so.
Rich and Emily are not here?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, now I knew. I got an email from Rich and Emily won't be back until November.
Okay.
Yeah.
First item on the agenda is election of officers. I don't know if people have any comments how they want to deal with this. There's a block. You want different people doing different things.
I make a motion that we to nominate Bob Hannon for chair, Bob Eisner for vice chair, and Ned Stachin for secretary.
I'll second those.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? So hearing none, have a motion on the floor for me as chair, Robert Eisner as vice chair, and Ned as secretary. Those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? So welcome everybody for another year.
Hey, Shannon and Bob, Jay Tulin is sending chats that he voted.
Oh. I just saw it.
Yeah, I'm seeing him on the chat. Thank you, Robert.
Did
Yeah.
you vote?
He did vote. He,
He
Okay.
voted aye.
yes.
Okay.
He
All right.
supported.
Next item on the agenda is 17 Vine Hill. We accepted the application at the October 7th meeting.
Okay. I believe Dave Whitney is on. Dave, or you want to start for your group? I know you've got a couple of folks on for you.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Dave Whitney, for the record.
Okay.
We,
So I see a few faces and an awful lot of names with no faces.
Hang
Lauren
on.
has muted everybody so that we don't have a lot of noise. And if somebody wants to speak at some point or has a question, I guess you
Uh-oh.
little
I think that's the other meeting.
down there to raise your hand. I don't see you raise your hand.
There's,
Well, I don't have to. I guess I don't have to.
no, there we go. We had somebody on 2 meetings, so I just muted them.
that was Bill. Okay.
God, somebody else is.
Isn't technology a wonderful thing?
Guys, I can only do so much more of this. Oh, boy. We really need to all be back in one happy room together. All right, let's try that again.
Dave.
Okay.
Whitney for the interruption. Go ahead.
Okay. Dave Whitney, professional engineer representing the applicant, Chris Rice. We This application is for construction of a driveway and related grading and utilities and a drainage swale within the 150-foot upland review area from a 65-foot-long intermittent swale. All the driveway and all construction activity is downhill, down gradient of the drainage swale. We walked the site. Most of the commission, or maybe all the commission, was there last Saturday. And you recall we started out by the road where the drainage swale was. Shannon, if you could put up sheet 2, which is my, there it is. Okay, thank you. We started at the road and we right by the drainage swale, which is in the light blue there, right there. And we looked at the several pink flags that Michael Klein had set on the site a number of years ago, and I reflagged. And it had rained quite a bit the day and the night before, and we saw a little bit of water flowing. No surprise. And then we walked up into the site. We went down and we looked at the neighbor's driveway first, and there is a riprap swale along the neighbor's driveway that's not shown on this plan, but it's the same type of riprap swale that is shown on the plan below this driveway as part of the regulated activity, right where Shannon's moving the pointer, to catch any runoff from the driveway and direct it into the catch basin and not into the neighbor's property. And so we walked up there, we looked at the swale, we looked at the driveway center line that I had staked out. Then we walked uphill outside of the upland review area, and we meandered up to where the approximate house location is. And then we walked out the dirt driveway, the dirt path that was the construction access path for the underdrain that's been installed for the septic system. And then so we came full circle. So that was our site walk. And since then, Michael Klein, who is with us tonight, who is a soil scientist that you know, has written a report regarding this intermittent water course and its functions and values and the impact from the proposed activities to the resource. Mike, maybe this would be a good time for you to present your letter.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Michael Klein, I'm a biologist and a soil scientist. My office is in West Hartford. As Dave mentioned, several years ago, I marked a short length of intermittent water course on this site. I believe that what's happened is when the work was done to install the underdrain for the septic system, they created a little bit of a drainage swale by cutting and filling on the downhill side, sort of berms it up, and eventually the concentration of flow there has eroded the soil sufficiently so that you get a very short length that has wetland hydrology, has water in it for longer than that immediately associated with a storm event, probably in the winter and early spring as the frost comes out of the ground and the water table is at its highest. So I did classify a short area of it as an intermittent water course. It clearly was installed to direct flow toward a catch basin that's immediately adjacent to it out at the street. The site slopes down from northwest, which is the lower right on this drawing, to southeast, and that drainage well and intermittent water course actually divert runoff or collect runoff from the area that would, under other circumstances, drain down toward the proposed driveway. The area around the intermittent water course is a second growth forest. If you walked up that intermittent water course, I'm sure you saw there's a lot of multiflora rose and barberry in the understory. The second growth trees are oaks, maples, hickories, pines, and cedars. There's no wetland soils associated with this intermittent water course. The intermittent water course does not provide any flood attenuation or overbank storage, water quality renovation, pollutant attenuation, habitat functions. It's not significant from a recreation, education, or scientific standpoint. It really is it functions to convey surface flow and groundwater discharge down toward the street and the catch basin. There is some evidence of erosion, so there is some minor sediment source that's being contributed to the town drainage system and then down to the wetland and water course at the low point on Vine Hill, which is further to the northeast. I've taken a look at the site plan. As Dave has mentioned, there's no direct impact. There's no activity proposed within the intermittent water course. Not going to be dredged, graded, filled, channelized, or otherwise altered. The driveway, or a portion of the driveway, is in the upland review area. It is downslope of the intermittent water course, so there's really no opportunity for any of that work to have an impact on the intermittent water course, the regulated area. So just to summarize, the proposed site plan has no adverse impacts on wetlands or water courses. One could say it has a very minor positive impact in terms of stabilizing the upper portion of the site, which would minimize erosion in that water course. There are a couple of photographs that are attached to my report that is part of the record that shows the water course and the erosion. This is the upper portion of it, and you can see where the soil is bermed up a little bit on the left-hand side, the downhill side of this photograph. It was a created channel, and then the next photograph shows that there is some exposed soil along the edge of it, so there is some minor erosion. These photographs were taken on the 19th, which is Monday. There were a couple of spots where there was, maybe a centimeter or a half an inch or quarter of an inch of water in it. There wasn't any flow. There was quite a bit of rain last week, so this really is a very minor feature. Be happy to answer any questions.
Dave, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, I think in the absence of any significance to the wetlands and no impact from the proposed activities, then we don't feel there'll be any impact to the wetlands, and we request approval of the application. Thank you.
And so keeping up with tradition, Dave, you actually get to go first tonight. If you have any questions or comments.
Oh, lucky me. No, I think I'm all set with this one. Thank you.
Robert?
No questions.
Mark?
I have no questions.
Ned?
Where'd Ned go?
Ned, are you on mute?
Ned's on mute.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Okay, thank you. How long is the existing in?
Say it again, Ned, you cut out.
How long has the drain been in?
How long has the under drain been in? Dave, do you?
Several years. Bear with me, didn't expect that question.
I don't need an exact, just approximate.
I believe it was installed in 2015.
Okay.
The plan for the under drain was dated 2014. And I think it went in 2015.
So now you say this channel was kind of created, which it appears to be since it lines up with the catch basin. Was like, at what point was that channel created?
Well, Shannon, are we supposed to say our name each time?
That's okay, Dave.
I mean, we used to have to do that. Okay, I just,
it's
when the site was surveyed in 2014, when this underdrain septic plan was drawn up, the swale and the intermittent water course was shown on that plan. So the swale that becomes an intermittent water course on this plan that you see on the screen, you see the 65 feet right there where Michael's 5 wetlands flags are. That's the intermittent water course. And then the rest of it is a drainage swale in yellow. That was all there before the underdrain was installed, because it was shown on the proposed plan at that time.
Okay. Now, when we're at the site visit, we noted several good-sized trees that are going to have to be removed for the driveway. So I would be interested in having a requirement that maybe the trees that are removed be replaced starting, at the area of the driveway following the completion of construction, the dirt path there, to maybe keep that area, to make that area become more natural looking. And, in order so we can restore some of the trees that are taken down for the construction.
Let me just ask a question. How are the trees related to the intermittent water course, and how will planting new trees affect the intermittent water course? I mean, I'm sure that Christian Rice, who's developing this site, wants to landscape his whole lot, and there will be a lot of plantings, but why are trees necessary when the clearing has no impact on the intermittent water course? I mean,
I think, well, I don't know. I think our purview is a little more than just exactly the water course. I think we try to operate in a way where, we're trying to protect the environment overall on this. I mean, that's, we have had a lot of incidents where where some tree removal was required for the construction, and we had requested and were approved to have trees replaced. I'm not putting a lot of requirements on it, but I think it would be a good faith effort if you want us, to approve this, and you're going to put it. I mean, there already is a paved path in that would be considered the driveway, and you want to relocate that. So I think you have to give a little to get a little.
well, I'm assuming the applicant will comply with the commission's request if they feel some additional trees are warranted. I just want to say that this is an unusual application in that it's very rare, I think, that you see applications in front of your commission with a wetlands that is so insignificant as this one is. I understand your general desire if there's a lot of tree clearing and there might have a thermal effect on the wetlands, or the wetlands are a lot more significant. But in this case, you've heard the expert testimony from Michael Klein that there's no impact on the wetlands. So it seems to me that there should be no need to have to replace trees that are cut down. But I sense the applicant will go along with the commission because he is desirous of having this application approved. I just don't see the scientific basis for needing some additional trees.
Well,
I don't know, Michael, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Well, a couple of thoughts. Number one is that the site is wooded. The path isn't that large. It may not be feasible to replace the trees on a one-to-one basis and give them enough room to grow to be healthy. I guess that's my first thought. My second thought is that without getting too deep into the regulatory weeds, I would just suggest to the commissioner that, in fact, your jurisdiction is limited to activities that affect wetlands. And while people may propose measures in areas outside of wetlands to mitigate those what may be perceived as impacts, if the activity that's in the upland review area has no impact, then there's really no basis for calling for some mitigation. As David said, I think our client would be happy to work with the staff to identify some areas where some additional trees could be installed. But I would agree with Dave Whitney that there's no technical basis for such a requirement.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a second. Chairman Hannon, Commissioner Eisner has his hand raised.
I didn't see it, but go ahead, Robert.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Shannon. You know, I'll just add in that I think the issue at hand is that there doesn't need to be the need to have an application before the commission if the existing driveway was being used. The fact that the applicant is choosing to conduct activity within the regulated area gives this commission jurisdiction. And if we determine that there is the need to offset some of the tree cutting with additional trees, then that is completely within the reasonable purview of the commission. Now, with that said, I actually don't strongly support the need to plant additional trees because I think there's a fairly substantial number of trees that would remain. Another thing we could consider is whether we want to include a conservation easement to protect the trees that would remain. But I did want to address the sort of jurisdictional issue that it's important to recognize. There is an alternative to conducting any activity within the regulated area, and that's simply to use the existing, as rough as it is, the existing access into the property. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I would agree with that because I raised the issue at the last meeting, just to at least put it out on the table.
Shannon?
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't we finish with questions because none of the commission members have had enough. So Ned, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't have any other. I just would say I didn't intend, I didn't ask for a one-to-one tree removal. I was just asking for some trees or brush or whatever to be planted in the area where the driveway is.
Okay.
And I'm sure the homeowner is gonna, gonna want something there if it's no longer the roadway. But I just think it's a reasonable thing since, by rights, they could just use the driveway the way it is, but they're choosing to act within the 150 upland review area. So that's why I think it would be worthwhile to require this.
Okay. Anything else or you're all set? Ned, you're all set?
Yes, I'm all set.
Okay.
Hey, this is a test. Is Jay's voicemail working here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Absolutely.
I figured out what I did wrong. I'm all set. I do not have any questions.
Okay,
Aren't you lucky that you can hear me talk now?
Thank you.
Okay. Guy?
All right, Guy, you've got to unmute your microphone. There you go.
I think there's been enough discussion about this. I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right.
Okay. here is sort of probably my biggest concern about having walked the site. It looks as though the soils can be compacted rather easily, and it's generating a lot of water that's running off the site. So one of my primary issues is erosion sedimentation control measures. I also believe that there needs to be some type of, I don't know if you want to call it a yard drain or something, but I do think you may need to pick up a lot of the water that's currently running down that pathway that's going onto the road that can create a hazard in wintertime, that there needs to be something done to redirect that water so that it stays on the property and gets into the appropriate storm drains. So that's one of the bigger concerns I have.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Hang on. Apparently I gotta mute everybody. Hang on, I just gotta find them, Bob. There you go. Sorry for the interruption.
No, saying that's where my bigger concern is, because again, any place there's going to be work done on the site, you may be creating some new channels for water flowing overland. And I think this is going to be one of those sites that erosion sedimentation control is critical, and also controlling water running from the site towards the roadway. That's the biggest issue that I saw out there on the site. I mean, I'm not going to be really stubborn about the existing pathway that's cut into the property, but there was a whole lot of water either sitting there and or flowing off that was getting out into the road. And I just don't think that that's appropriate to create a hazard condition in the wintertime, because it is not a relatively flat road. So I think that's something that needs to be done with drainage. I understand it's outside the wetland area, but it's going to be something you guys are going to need to deal with, because I don't think anybody's going to want to see a property develop where it's going to be a hazard to road conditions.
Okay. Dave, do you want to respond to any of the comments at this point?
Yes, just a couple quick comments. I absolutely agree to where that existing dirt path is. There's water channelized and it's flowing out in the driveway, and that absolutely needs to be eliminated. It's outside of the upland review area, but it is causing a problem in the road. In fact, Shannon, I think you had mentioned that you had spoken to the previous owner about it in the past. So that's a situation that the site plan, when we finalize the site plan outside the upland review area, will address that. Because drainage is important on this site, that's the reason this driveway has a new catch basin installed directly down gradient of it to pick up any water that comes off of it, that we have 2 leak offs on the driveway to direct some of the water into the woods, and that we are putting a new swale in. So absolutely, I mean, these are things that aren't usually done for driveways, but are done in this case. So yes, that situation with the dirt path, that will be resolved as part of the final site plan. I don't want to belabor the issue of additional trees. I was under the impression if we have no impact on the wetlands, as you have expert testimony, then you don't examine feasible and prudent alternatives. But to your point, there is a way to bring a driveway into this lot. It doesn't work with the aesthetics that the owner desires. So I know that he doesn't want to have the application denied over the issue of some additional trees. So I'll leave it at that. I don't think there were any other outstanding questions. Erosion control, yes, absolutely. The site plan will have to have a very comprehensive erosion control plan as part of it. Thank you.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from, because again, just based on what I saw at the site, for the limited amount of work that's already been done, there are going to be some issues here if you don't do it properly. So it really needs to be addressed, and you need to make sure that on-site drainage stays on-site. Now, again, there was a catch basin that we saw that was I guess it's more easterly in looking at the map. I see the north arrow at the top, but it's more up closer to where the dirt pathway is in. Down in that area, maybe a little further down the road, it looked as though there was a catch basin.
There is, yes.
That the back end of that is open. So it may be that on the lower portion of that site, you may need to do something to put in a swale or something there, just to try to make sure that the water stays on site. It can get into the catch basin and you don't create a hazard. But that's something I think you need to look at when you ultimately design this. Again, I just don't think anybody wants to have some problems created on this. And I'm also concerned a little bit about, with all the water that we saw either collected or running, it just gives me the idea that when this site is actually developed, I'm concerned where water may be going, and you may be opening up some areas to some erosion that could theoretically be going through the 150-foot upland review area as it tries to make its way down to the intermittent stream. So it's just more word of warning that that's something that you're really going to need to pay close attention to in the design of the lot itself. I fully understand that it's sort of outside of our jurisdiction, but I just want to make sure that I'm on record saying that these are some issues that I see that I think you will need to address going forward, assuming we go forward with the application. Then if you go to planning and zoning, for a site plan, or is this, Shannon, is this going to be before planning and zoning, or do they have to just do local, like through you, building, engineering?
Dave, this is our zone R80. I'm asking off the top of your head. It likely does not have to go, particularly if it's R80.
I mean, I should know what zone it is, but I don't have it on my plan.
Okay, but if it doesn't have to go through planning and zoning, I think Shannon knows where we're coming from.
It's a building permit.
So, I mean, and Michael, I don't know if you have anything you want to add in terms of at least what we've seen at the site and how water seems to be somewhat chaotic when you disturb the upper few inches or even, the first 6 inches of soil out there.
Yeah, I think this is Michael Klein. I think what happens in these soils, they're fairly fine grained, and when they get worked, when they're wet, they can produce a fair amount of runoff. Also, based on the slopes there. I think once the site is fully stabilized, that will be minimized. Certainly, proper sediment erosion controls is always critical to protecting downstream resources. I'm not qualified to judge the safety issue. I would point out to the commission, without hopefully not being considered to be argumentative, that in your section 8 under permit decisions, letter E says the commission shall not deny or condition an application for a regulated activity in an area outside of wetlands or water courses on the basis of an impact or effect on aquatic plant or animal life unless such activity will likely impact or affect the physical characteristics of such wetlands or water courses. And I think that's, we're not trying to suggest that you don't have jurisdiction here. You clearly have jurisdiction. The question, I think, is if these activities are unlikely, or in my opinion, have really no likelihood of having an adverse effect on this feature, then it should be approved.
Yeah, and my general take is, I mean, I don't consider what you're saying to be argumentative or anything else, but I think it's more making sure that town staff knows exactly where we feel on some of these issues, because we're not going to be the final decision makers on this. We may be as far as the wetland application goes, but you still need to pull a building permit, and just making sure that town staff knows kind of what some of our positions are. So there's some things that they can look for, assuming this goes forward and you apply for the building permit. There may be some things that they can then take into consideration. I'm not
I
necessarily
agree
saying it's part of
completely.
our position in conditions or things of that nature.
Yeah, no,
But I think it's important for staff to know where we feel there are some issues that need to be addressed.
agree completely. I was really talking about the other issue of the driveway location. I completely agree. If this had to go to zoning, I was going to suggest that you could, you're supposed to, the technical language is you're supposed to file a report, and certainly the report, which often is just the decision on the permit, could include a discussion of that issue. You could also make that report to the building official, because I 100% agree that proper erosion control and proper management of the runoff at the site is necessary. No argument whatsoever.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to make sure that staff is aware of what some of the concerns that we have are. And I mean, for example, when Ned was talking about possible trees, I mean, that may be something that the applicant wants to do himself or herself, simply because they don't want somebody pulling in on a dirt driveway. So it's just to kind of buffer that from view. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's outside of the wetland area, so it's outside of our jurisdiction. So Dave, do you have something else?
Just a couple things. You saw that, well, first of all, the applicant, Chris Rice and his wife, they're very excited about being in this neighborhood, and they want to be good neighbors. So they don't want to cause any problems with their downstream neighbor or anybody in the street. And so they're going to do a proper job, and the town staff will make sure the site plan shows a proper erosion control plan. And the last thought I had is, somebody has already been dumping on that dirt drive. So I'm sure we saw that when we were out there. So I'm sure the owners want to eliminate people using that as a dumping ground. So that dirt drive will be gone.
So you don't want to promote illegal dumping there?
No.
Okay, that works for everybody. Are there any other comments from any commission members? Hearing nothing, what's your pleasure, folks? Do we want to vote on this tonight? Do you want 2 weeks to think about it? What's your pleasure?
We've got to determine significance as the first step.
Okay. So I'll start with that. I don't think it's a significant activity. So I'll put my 2 cents in early.
This is Ned. I'll make a motion that this is not a significant activity.
Second.
Okay. Motion determining that this is an insignificant activity. Any other discussion, comments? Hearing none. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Aye, record.
What was that?
I was on mute. I just wanted to make sure you got my aye on the record.
Okay, thank you. So it is not a significant activity. So what's your feeling about the application, folks? How do you want to go about it?
Well, I don't, this is Ned. I don't think anything's going to change in 2 weeks. So
Okay,
I think we've made our feelings known for the town staff.
how do you feel, Robert?
Yeah, I would lean towards approving tonight. I'll make a motion that we approve the application with a few conditions. One being that the town staff be contacted for a pre-construction meeting after the soil and erosion control is installed and prior to any tree removal, that an integrated pest management plan be developed for the developed property, and that appropriate drainage infrastructure be installed to eliminate any water overflowing the curb. And I'm receptive to any comments on trees.
I would just make the general condition that the area of, part of the reason I think the area of the driveway should be restored, the existing driveway, is just, I think it'll help if you, whether there's some brush or trees or whatever, to make sure that it doesn't become a path for water in the future, and that that's addressed. I think that having either brush or trees put in there would help to do that. So I would just leave it up to the purview of town staff to make recommendations for that area on, you know, as part of the site approval.
Accepted to the motion that the drainage improvements include appropriate planting. Thanks, Ned.
I didn't catch the last part of that, Robert. Drainage improvements.
That the drainage improvements include appropriate planting. So that would capture the concept that Ned had brought in. That's part of the motion.
Very good. Thank you.
So that's your motion?
Yes.
I'll
Is there
second
a
it.
second?
Ned.
Okay. Any discussion? I guess we'll start in order again. Dave?
No, I'm all set.
Robert?
Nope, no further comment. Thank you.
Okay. Mark?
I have no comments.
Ned?
No further comments.
Jay?
Other comments, thank you.
Guy?
No comments.
I have no comments either. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the application with a number of conditions. Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next up is Lot 6B, Pheasant Hill Road. There's a regulated activity in the wetland and upland review area to construct a new home, driveway, septic system with associated grading. And I believe that what we would need to do, as the only formal action we would need to do, is approve, or I'm sorry, accept the application. Is that correct?
Correct. The applicant is here to do a presentation like we normally would. So.
Yep, nope, that's fine.
Correct. So the only
So we will
thing.
let the applicant have his say or her say.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Ron Wolf, professional engineer with my office located in Woodbury. And I'm here representing the applicant, Danny Mancini of Wolcott. And this property is an existing building lot. It was created as part of a subdivision in 1971. It's located at the south end of Pheasant Hill Road. Has an overall area of 2.00 acres. It's situated in an R80 zoning district. The north end of the property near Pheasant Hill Road is generally flat, and then the property slopes downward to the south and the west towards the wetland area, and the entire property is essentially wooded. There's an existing stone foundation located at the kind of near the tip of the property at the north end, essentially where the driveway is currently proposed. The property is bounded on the north by Gene Watson, on the south by the Farmington Land Trust, and on the west across the right-of-way by John Lavery. And wetlands on the site were delineated by Eric Davison, professional soil scientist, who was in attendance with us this evening. There's also a vernal pool situated at the southwest majority of it is off-site, but there is a portion of it that's just on the southwesterly property line. It's shaded in blue on your map that you see. There's a small wetland area situated near the easterly property line. It's shaded in brown on the map. It's located directly in front of the house. It's about 604 square feet. And then the larger wetland system is located to the south of the proposed improvements. All the flag numbers and the wetland boundaries were surveyed by Roy Cheney. He's a licensed land surveyor from Bethlehem. And the applicant is proposing a 3-bedroom house with on-site septic system, a small pool, and a little bit of a patio, with a driveway that connects up to Pheasant Hill Road. We have the proposed house site situated as essentially right up against the building offset lines, which you could see on the map. So the house is essentially located as far away from the wetlands as possible. We do have approval from the Farmington Valley Health District for the septic system. And we have, we're proposing the yellow shaded area as conservation easement. It's about 1.19 acres. Just another item to discuss with the commission before I hand it over to Eric Davison, who can discuss the wetlands on the property. We would be willing to, the applicant would be willing to apply to get a variance on the building setback lines to move the house further or closer to Pheasant Hill Road, which would help increase the separation distances between the proposed activity and the wetlands. That's something that we would be willing to do after the wetland process, the wetland permit process, and possibly if we could get a recommendation letter from the from this commission that possibly would help the case at the Zoning Board of Appeals. At this time, I would like to have Eric Davison, the soil scientist, give a description of the wetlands and the vernal pool at the site. Eric, if you're with us.
Yeah, hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
All set, Eric.
Yeah, so as Ron described, we delineated the wetlands back in May. As Ron mentioned, there are 3 wetlands on the property. The first, where Ron has his cursor shown, is a very small isolated wetland. That's the one that the proposing to wrap the driveway around. That's a very marginal wetland. It's technically wet, but it's one of those wetlands that you would walk right by if you weren't taking a close look at it. It has vegetation that's on the transition between wetland and upland. It has no surface hydrology. It's basically like a rain garden hydrology. The rain and surface water flow into that feature, and it infiltrates very quickly. So it never has any real standing water. So it's just a saturated hydrology, marginally wet, but technically wet. The reason I'm saying it's marginally wet is because, you know, those small marginally wet wetlands generally don't have, you know, a lot of functions and values. The wetland that's in the back of the property, the very large wetland, that's a very large wooded swamp. It's on a moderate slope. As you get down to the southwestern portion of the wetland, there's a stream that develops. It's basically a headwater wetland. So a stream develops in that portion of the wetland. It flows south and then west again. It flows across the road and into the golf course, where it connects to Pope Brook, which flows into the Farmington River. So it's a headwater wetland that drains into a headwater perennial stream. The third wetland's on the southwest corner of the property. That's the wetland where we identified the vernal pool. And just a quick background on that, when we were flagging in late May, that area that we have mapped as the pool, which is shown with the blue hatching, that's an area that was flooded, and there was a fairly robust population of wood frog tadpoles, wood frogs being vernal pool indicator species. It's a very small pool. It's historically man-made would be my best guess. The reason I say that is because on the downslope side of the wetland, there's an old sort of fill road or driveway. I'm not really sure what the purpose of it was, but there's an old like 4 or 6 inch culvert that that connects this wetland, which is isolated, to another wetland that's just about 20 feet to the south on the Farmington Land Trust property. So for some reason, someone historically put in a little crossing. They put in an undersized pipe. It created a small backwater pool that now functions as a vernal pool. So it's man-made. It's not a overly large or significant vernal pool, just a small pocket, but it did have an indicator species in it. So Ron had asked me to provide my recommendations on how best to minimize impacts to the vernal pool. And the standard recommendation that's most stringent or most restrictive, obviously with vernal pools, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is the best practices is to have no development with 100 feet of a vernal pool, and that's a recommendation we have for whether it's a residential lot or a 20 lot subdivision. And every time I recommend that on a single house lot, it always causes issues, obviously, because in many cases putting a 100-foot no build zone around a vernal pool on a single residential lot renders the lot unbuildable. So you'll see in my letter that I wrote on October 15th that describes all of my vernal pool recommendations. I open by saying, best case scenario is to provide a 100-foot no disturbance buffer. On this site, I can let Ron weigh in on this, but it probably isn't feasible to achieve that on a site like this. So I think what Ron did was, move things and shift things. If you recall, I don't think the commission has seen the previous version, but I know Shannon, you had, that showed a slightly different footprint that was closer to the wetlands and a little bit more substantial. So the disturbance has been pulled back to try to accommodate that 100-foot recommendation. The other big issue with vernal pool impacts is hydrology. So I had asked Ron just to kind of look at his grading and make sure that the pre and post construction hydrology remains the same. You don't want to add water to a vernal pool or take water away from a vernal pool. You want to maintain that hydro period, and the hydro period is the depth and the duration of standing water. So you really want to maintain that hydro period. The other recommendations that I had were to restrict construction activities during the primary migratory season, which varies from season to season and is varying more and more as climate change alters our spring thaw. But in the past 4 or 5 years, that's roughly from late February to mid-May. And that's the season when the adults move into the pool, breed, and then move out of the pool. If you could restrict construction from that period of time, you can reduce a lot of the impacts to that cohort of amphibians, that season of amphibians. I had also suggested that you provide some measure to prevent future homeowner encroachment, because the big issue with vernal pools in residential settings is, death by 1,000 cuts. You lay out the pool, someone has a house nearby, and slowly the yard expands and the activities around the house expands. And that happens on all sides of the vernal pool. And before you know it, the pool's been compromised. So anything you can do to kind of control those limits of disturbance, whether it's a boulder wall or ideally a conservation easement, is optimal to prevent further encroachment of residential activities into the pool. The last measure I had recommended was during construction to use erosion and sedimentation control measures that don't restrict amphibian movement. There's the past few years has been a big transition to things like straw wattles or core fiber logs that are more natural. They're closer to the ground. They function just as well as silt fence, but they don't prevent amphibian migration, which most silt fence does. Wood frogs can get over smaller silt fence, but it really does restrict amphibian movement to a large degree. So using, a modified erosion control perimeter that would be something like straw wattles is better. So those were the recommendations that I had for Ron on the vernal pool. I can answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay, thank you. Ron, do you have anything else to add at this point?
Just as Eric mentioned, we did go through a couple of revisions on the site plan with Shannon and took some of her suggestions into consideration. Our first go around, we had the driveway on the right-hand side, of the lot, which was our the applicant's request. That generated or that created the fill and the disturbed area, pushed the disturbed area a lot closer to the westerly wetlands and the vernal pool. So we did revise the house configuration around, pulled it up as close as we could to the north, and put the driveway on the opposite side, on the left side, if you're looking at the lot from the front, or on the easterly side. So that allows us to adjust the grade and start lowering the grade as you move from the left to the right towards the vernal pool. It also keeps the driveway further away from the vernal pool, allowing for more overland flow of the sheet flow from the driveway, to the vernal pool. So that was a good suggestion, and we added the conservation easement distance away from the wetlands. So it does have a considerable amount of upland area in the conservation easement area, as well as the wetland areas also. And that upland area that I'm referring to is in that portion between the easterly large wetland area and the smaller westerland wetland area by the vernal pool. Let's see. We would be more, willing to use the recommendations Eric suggested for straw wattles in lieu of silt fence. Currently, we just have a sedimentation control system shown on the plan, which is silt fence, but we would certainly be willing to use Eric's suggestion or something that the commission would recommend also. Let's see, I think as Eric mentioned, it would be extremely difficult to have to maintain that 100-foot buffer to the vernal pool, but we do have 71 feet to the silt fence and a little bit more to that to the edge of the grading. So we do have a pretty good majority of that 100-foot achieved to the limit of disturbance. With that, I would try and answer any of the questions that commission may have at this point.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Thanks. I did have a couple of questions about the vernal pool. The 100-foot circle around it is, at least at present, totally undeveloped. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. There's actually the land trust undeveloped by means of buildings, or because I'm not exactly sure the location of the structures west of that vernal pool. There is a house on Mr. Lavery's property. I believe it's closer to Pheasant Hill Road, but I would have to look on an aerial, which I could do, to see what's 100 feet away on the south and more to the west.
Yeah, this is Eric Davison. The neighboring property, I think, is the Lavery property. They've got some clearing and sort of rough lawn that falls into the 100-foot zone. Yeah, right in that area. Yeah.
How about that 50-foot right of way? Is that vegetated or is that cleared?
Yeah, that's largely vegetated. Yes.
There is a presence of an access road to get down into the land trust property. You could kind of see the dashed lines in the access way, and they kind of eventually fade off the further you go to the south. But that is the access into that property now.
All right. I did read over those recommendations, which to me sounded like a good idea. We should do all of those for sure. I was wondering about the roof runoff.
Okay.
Is there any plan to get that infiltrated into the ground?
We have what we did is on the opposite side of the vernal pool, we have a level spreader. We've used that before. It's a pretty good detail. It's on sheet 1 of the plan. You can see where it's located. It's right there where the mouse is, and essentially that's almost like a curtain drain. It's a stone trench with a perforated pipe, and it allows the runoff to come out of the leader drain collector pipe, and it gets dissipated into the stone trench. And then if and when the stone trench level gets filled, the water kind of bleeds out of that stone trench to that level spreader, and then eventually it'll make its way towards the wetland. So you're infiltrating that stormwater into the ground, and then if the stone reaches its capacity, the water kind of just bubbles out and would flow down gradient towards the wetlands.
Okay, yeah, I did see it. It was a footing drain, but it's also the leaders as well. Both.
Well, the footing drain is a separate pipe. That is generally just consists of a trickle at the most, and then we have a little stone apron proposed for the footing drain.
I see.
Then,
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The little isolated wetland that's going to be surrounded by development is, I think the report mentioned some plantings in there, or is that just going to become a grassed area?
Eric, is that something you would recommend for plantings? It's pretty close to the house. I'd have to let Eric comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, I had suggested, because I mean, to be completely honest, the wetlands being avoided, but obviously it's now going to be surrounded by the house and the garage and the driveway. It's gonna then become something that's more like a stormwater feature, and it has that kind of characteristic and signature already. Like I had mentioned, it's kind of like a rain garden at this point. That's how the hydrology works there. So once that driveway is constructed and the garage and all that is built around it, it's going to receive surface runoff from those paved surfaces. It's sparsely vegetated now, just naturally. So I think its infiltration function and groundwater recharge function could be improved if it had a little bit more vegetation embedded into it. And that's why I had suggested planting a handful of shrubs just to kind of diversify and thicken up that shrub layer. So I think it would then function a little bit better in terms of just capturing runoff and infiltrating it.
Okay. And in your presentation, it was mentioned about the variance getting the building closer to the road. Doesn't seem like that would significantly make it any further away from the vernal pool, or would it?
I think we could pull the grading. I don't know. I don't think you could see my mouse, but Shannon's mouse is in that area. I think if the house is moved closer to the road, a lot of that grading will go along with it. So if you see down by the 512, 510, 508, a lot of those lines would get pulled up closer to or further away from that wetland area. It would certainly, in my opinion, it looks like it would definitely help.
Yeah, here's the existing 508 contour coming through the property, and then here's the proposed 508 contour that's necessary to accommodate the grading in order to slope away from the home.
So
Okay.
If you moved it, it would probably move it in towards that little wetland area.
It would. That's correct. Yes.
And this is, and to be clear, this wetland is it's direct 604 square feet of direct wetland impact. I don't think the intent was to save this in its entire, I don't know, Ron and Eric, what,
That's correct. I just feel with, to be realistic on building the house and to do the grading, it would be, virtually impossible to save that wetland, being that close to the house and the driveway. And then, to maintain the hydrology and it's essentially a little depression there. Being that close to the house, that would be, that we're proposing that wetland to be impacted, and not remain there.
Yeah, that's what I thought in my earlier question about the plantings. Maybe
Yeah,
that wetlands are gone.
yeah, we could certainly replant that area, but even to have that depression there right in front of the garage and not to be 100% sure how long it would take the water to, to infiltrate in the ground. And then you'd have to have some type of an overflow, obviously, so that you didn't have standing water that close to the house for a long duration, I think would be necessary.
Yeah, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, I had some of the same questions that Commissioner Fox had. So I think it would actually be useful if you could develop a schematic that would show where the house would be located and what the grading would look like if you had a variance. I don't necessarily concur with the comments that you had made about, well, it's just not that convenient to work around the 600-foot wetland. It is a wetland, it is regulated. This is obviously a tough lot to develop because it has a significant wetland to the rear. It has the vernal pool, which probably will have the attention of all the commissioners. But I wouldn't say that that wetland, the small 600 square foot wetland area, has to be impacted. Perhaps it's the wrong design for the lot if you can't work around it. So I think that's something the commission will have to evaluate. I think given the significance of the wetlands as described on the property and the vernal pool, I would certainly want to take a look at the property through a site walk after we receive the application tonight. And then I think Commissioner Fox also had touched on the fact that we have some recommendations from Eric Davidson. I think I'd like to see the plan revised to incorporate those recommendations rather than saying, well, they're out there and we can pick and choose. It seems pretty straightforward that there is a vernal pool that has recommendations to protect it, and those should all be incorporated. And I think that those recommendations that would protect the vernal pool both during construction but also during the prolonged residential use of the property. And as Mr. Davidson said, oftentimes it's death by 1,000 blades of grass. So I think we want to minimize how many blades of grass are going to impact that vernal pool. And that concludes my comments.
Mark?
Yes, I'd just like to verify the width of the wetland area down by the vernal pool, the conservation area that's in yellow. How wide is that area?
Oh, let's see. Oh, from the vernal pool to the, let me get you a quick measurement on my computer here. So in the vicinity of where you see test pit D, where it says TPD there. Yep, right there. From the property line to that test pit is about 53 feet. From the southerly property line, I'm going to say the southwesterly property line. Yes, from there to there is 53 feet. Is that the dimension you were looking for?
Well, yeah, and further down by the vernal pool, it's got to be a little bit, probably a little wider.
Yeah, down by the vernal pool, it's about 66 feet in that location right there, yes.
How far is the house from the vernal pool, the proposed house?
Just give me 1 second. I'll give you that dimension. That would be, it's about 124 feet from the closest point of the house to the vernal pool. Yep, and it would be the back right corner of the house to the tip of the vernal pool. Would be that? Yes, right where the mouse is. Yep.
So I think it was recommended that maybe not to cut any trees within 100 feet of the vernal pool. So that would mean pretty close to the house, you would not be cutting any trees. You'll be forested.
Well, we were maintaining the 71 feet from the vernal pool to the limit of disturbance. That's about, we do have tree cutting beyond that 71 feet to get the grading worked out for the house and the septic system. It's a 3-bedroom house. It's not a big septic system, but we did the test holes with the Farmington Valley Health, and that seemed to be the best place where the septic system could go, where the soils were the best. It's kind of a high spot on in that area where the soils were suitable. Again, it's an existing lot. It was created in 1971. You know, a lot of the shape and the location of these wetland features in the vernal pool is out of our control. If it was a new subdivision, I'm sure things would be done a lot differently, but it's something that's existing that we're trying to work with the best we can.
All right, thank you. I would like to do a site visit for this piece of property. That's all.
Okay. Could I just ask what the commission would like us, if anything, to have staked out for the site visit?
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. We'll get through everybody's questions. We'll set the date and we'll discuss.
Okay, thank you.
We've gone through all the commission members.
Okay, Mark, you done?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Ned?
What do you plan on the time of year for the construction of the house?
Would be next season. You know, could be in the summertime, late spring would be a good time.
Okay. I just have a comment. I kind of agree that I don't know if you'll be able to save anything on that 600 square feet of direct wetland impact, but I think, you know, there's a trade-off to get with the conservation area, you know, conservation easement, and it's, I think it's a worthwhile trade.
Yeah, I just to add it, obviously, if we pull the house forward and try and get a variance, then it really won't be possible to maintain that wetland, because you'd essentially be moving the whole house structure right into where that wetland area is. So, you know, but it will serve to protect and increase the buffer areas and limit a disturbance to the more valuable wetlands to the south and the vernal pool. So
right,
there is a trade-off.
I agree with that. That's all I have. And I do agree with I think a site visit would be worthwhile.
Jay? Are you muted, Jay?
Yep.
Sorry about that. I don't have any questions or comments other than I agree, from having listened to what everyone else had to say, that a sidewalk's probably a good idea. Sorry about that.
Guy?
Did you hear me?
Yeah, all set, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guy?
Yeah, Bob. I'm just very concerned about the wetland buffer being as short as it is. And it doesn't seem like there's enough space between it, as it's shown here, and the house to actually have 100-foot buffer on both sides. And that bothers me. Plus, I think the other wetland is a goner. And I'm not happy with that either. Thanks, that's it.
Okay. Eric, I know when the plans were up earlier, one of the things I saw, which I really liked the idea of, is having no mesh plastics on your erosion sedimentation control measures. That can be very, very harmful. So I'm glad to see that you're looking at that kind of stuff. My position for a number of years has been when you've got wetlands involved, I'm always looking for something other than filter fabric fence, because I'm sorry, that stuff just doesn't work. The straw wattles, things of that nature, that to me is the way to go. It works out a little bit better for everybody. But I got a couple of comments, or questions I should say, about like the test pits that were done. What are the perk rates on the site?
Let's see, let me just go back to my other page sheet here. So we had we did 2 perks. One was 1 inch in 10 minutes, the other one was 1 inch in 20 minutes. So the system was designed on a 10 to 20 minute perk rate.
Okay, and was there any high groundwater table discovered?
Let's see, 18, there was no water in the test holes at the time we dug them because it was in July, but we observed mottling and restrictive layers at 18 to 20 inches, which is typical, like a hard pan soil. It's typical for that area there. And you could see where the deep hole tests were done.
So you'll need to go in with an engineered system, right?
Yes.
Fill?
Yes, with select fill, yes, sand.
Okay.
Yep.
I know, Eric, you mentioned, you like to look at the 100-foot buffer from vernal pools, but having sat next to Dr. Clements for I can't tell you how many years in meetings, I know that the critical path area for the vernal pools is typically 75 feet. My concern here would be at least meeting the 75-foot critical path area. I know you're at 71. So I guess from that perspective, and agreeing with some of the other commission members, I'm not sure that the wetland area by the driveway would serve that much of a purpose. I would much rather see the integrity of the vernal pool maintained. So I mean, that's my comment on that. Now, if you do work in that wetland area where the arrow is, or my arrow is anyway, by the driveway, is that going to trigger anything from the Army Corps?
Yeah, so just to weigh in on a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, the goal when you look at a site is to identify the most valuable wetlands and preserve those. And even if, to me, also, I'm a wetland commissioner in my town here in Chester. I would be comfortable seeing that small isolated wetland altered or filled if it provided additional buffer to the 2 other wetlands, which clearly have high function. One's a vernal pool, one's a headwater that drains to the Farmington River. I don't see an issue with impacting that small wetland, provided that its function can be preserved. And like I mentioned, just creating a simple swale with plantings, like I had suggested, to just capture runoff and infiltrate it back into the ground would mimic the function of that wetland as it is today. And Dr. Hannon, you're right. I mean, as you said, having sat next to Dr. Clemens for many years, the 100-foot is a guidance in the absence of specific information about where the amphibians are moving to and from. The good thing about this site is that it doesn't interrupt any migratory pathway, and that's kind of a critical thing with vernal pool, with development near vernal pools. Is one is impacting habitat itself, which this is obviously going to do. And I've been operating under the assumption that this is a buildable lot and something's going to be built on this lot. As small as you can shrink it, you're not going to build obviously 1,000 square foot house on this lot, at least based on my assumptions looking at the neighborhood. So operating under the assumption this is going to be a buildable lot, you know it's going to impact some habitat. I think shrinking it as much as we can, even if it results in impacting that small isolated wetland, which has almost no value. But again, the good news is it doesn't interrupt any migratory pathway, because if you look north and west, that just takes you through the other parts of that residential development. That's the good news about it. So it's relatively minor habitat loss. Yes, it would be good if we could take the development envelope from 70 plus feet to 100 feet, but you know, these are all sort of arbitrary numbers. It's not, you know, these aren't hard and fast, you know, lines in the sand.
Just out of curiosity, now the area draining from, it's like the corner of the house out back, that was a footing drain that's going in, that's proposed?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if this would be something to, you know, if, for example, that wetland area over by the driveway was in fact impacted, and with the way the house goes in and the driveway, I don't know if you can take either the footing drain or maybe some of the roof leaders and run them into that wetland area to maintain the water levels. I mean, I don't know if that's something that's feasible or not. I don't know what impact it would have on that wetland. I mean, even if it was reduced in size, it may still serve a purpose. I'm just wondering if that's something that could be utilized.
Eric, I think Eric has some opinions, I think, on that type of mitigation. We could certainly, if Eric thinks it would be valuable there, I would have to go on Eric's input. We could certainly look into that.
What about putting a rain garden back here, Bob, at the back where, you know, filter the turn?
Yeah, no, I just thought that they, you know, in some respects, they weren't talking about covering the entire wetland area over by the driveway, but some of it. So I was just curious about sort of equaling the water. I mean, I'm not hung up on that issue. I mean, if they do a rain garden in the back, that's wonderful too. But I was just wondering if they were sort of maintaining status quo with the amount of water going into that wetland area, even if it is reduced, reduced proportionately, or if it's not that feasible, that's fine. I mean, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other on it. Just, I'm throwing something up just for discussion, something to think about.
Okay.
And then the only other comment I have is I think it would probably be a good idea to do a site visit. But unless you want to move it to sometime in January, I won't be there.
Oh, right.
Yeah, oh, right.
Oh, right.
So,
We'll take pictures for you.
thank you, I appreciate it. But I think it would be a good idea to, you know, get a better handle on the site. I'm just wondering how something could possibly be done for the next meeting, just sort of a sketch maybe, like I think Robert was talking about, that if you were able to get a variance, what would you be going for? What distance?
So that's something we could definitely discuss with the applicant and the owner, and hopefully maybe discuss it with Shannon and see what would be a good distance, and then we could put together a sketch and see how it, if and how it improves the the separation distances. We could definitely look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking to have, you know, a big drawn out engineered detailed plan, but just to get an idea
Right.
of how that might impact the site, like moving the house forward, does that eliminate some of the grading requirements? And just out of curiosity, how much fill do you need to bring into the site?
Let's see. I have those numbers here. So it's about, on the whole site with the septic system in the house and the driveway, it's about 2,100 yards.
Okay.
2,124 yards, we figured.
Okay.
And I mean, for the most part, the entire lot is within your 150 foot upland review area. Just as I mentioned before, you know, when it was created in 1971, that's how they drew up the lot. But essentially, the whole lot is in the review area, except for just a little portion of that northerly tip. You could see the line for the 150 foot regulated area. It's all the way out by, yeah, it's that double dashed line there.
All the way out here.
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
way out there. So there's just a little tiny triangular piece, maybe 10 square feet or so. No, it's a little closer. Yeah, right there. That's not in the review area. So,
Okay.
Okay. So and does anybody else have any other comments? Questions?
Seems to be all
Okay.
fine.
If not, does somebody want to make a motion to accept the application?
So moved by Eisner.
Is there a
Dave will
second?
second.
Was that Ned?
Dave,
Okay, Dave. All right, motion on the floor to accept the application. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? So accept it, and I guess the question came up about a site visit, which is probably appropriate for this site. And the question I would have is, when it's set up, what might people want marked off, just to get an idea of where things are?
With the center line of the driveway and the four corners of the house.
Now, the wetlands are flagged, correct?
correct.
And they are visible?
They were done earlier in the year. Last
Okay.
time we were there, the flags were still up. There might be one or two missing
Yeah.
there.
But in general, they should be
Yeah.
there, so
Yes,
that'd be a pretty good indication.
yes, for sure.
Okay. All right, so Shannon, do you want to go ahead and work on a date? And
So I'm recommending Sunday, November 1st, we can do either 8:30 or 9. At this point, I can't do Saturday, the 31st. I've got family obligations at the moment, so. The Sunday, the 1st puts us to the meeting right before, or the Sunday right before the next meeting, which is the 4th.
I won't be able to make either one.
Yeah, no, I know. I guess, Sunday the 1st generally work for folks? Is there any objections?
sounds
Should
good.
be fine.
Okay. And a preference to 8:30 or 9 o'clock?
Either one.
Okay, I'm gonna go with 8:30 then and let us enjoy the rest of our days. And then I'd suggest, just from I haven't been out there, so I don't know how heavily wooded it is, but if, Ron, you can get a couple of stakes up the driveway, the four corner, just box out the house.
Sure.
The house. And maybe the two ends of the septic system in case folks want to take a walk down there.
Okay.
And to the extent you and/or Eric are available, you're welcome to join us. You
Yeah,
are,
we will, we'll plan on being there. At least one of us will be there for sure.
okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okey-doke. And I'm assuming we're gonna wait on significance till after the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can wait. This is Robert Eisner. I think we can wait. However, I would be surprised if I conclude anything other than a significant impact, given that almost well, it is clear, all of the activity that is proposed is within the 150-foot regulated area. There is work closer than ideal to a vernal pool, and there is currently a proposal to fill 600 feet of wetland. I'd be surprised if after the site walk, I conclude something other than it is a significant activity, just to help with the mindset from the early stages of the project.
Okay.
Okay.
From a timing standpoint, it's not going to matter whether we make that determination tonight or we wait till the November meeting. In either case, because there's only one meeting in November, the hearing would be December. So
Okay.
we can let that decision sit for this evening, unless anyone, if you folks feel otherwise, that's fine.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, 15 Pond Street.
Yes. And I've got to open up. There we go. I believe Ian is on the call.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. For the record, Ian Cole, professional soil scientist, professional wetland scientist, Middletown, Connecticut. I was contacted by Miss Lambert in September to help resolve the cease and desist order that she received from the town for unpermitted activities within the wetland boundary and within the upland review area. Specifically, the Lamberts had placed some fill along the roadside shoulder of 15 Pond Street and removed the understory of the wetlands, which largely consisted of burning bush and some spice bush, and removed several trees, both within the wetlands and with along the upland review area. It's my understanding that the commission took a site walk in September, so I think everybody here is familiar with the property and have seen the conditions of what's going on out there. So Mrs. Lambert reached out to me. I set up a meeting with her on the 25th for an initial site inspection to kind of go over to develop basically a scope and schedule the restoration activities and to come up with some recommendations of how could we restore this area to as good, if not better than the conditions prior to the disturbance. So as part of my due diligence, I wanted to review what the character of the wetland was prior to the disturbance. And so I was provided from town staff the prior site plans for 2014 approval for a lot on Pine Street, which is behind the subject lot, which is the origin of how the wetlands were delineated by Mr. Klein, who we saw earlier this evening. And essentially, Mr. Klein flagged the wetlands and at the time also gave an assessment report for 9 Pine Street, which was probably used again in the 2019 approvals for 15 Pond Street. And essentially, Mr. Klein's reports and assessment characterized this wetland as the remnants of a wooded wetland that was embedded within a dense residential development, which I concur with. And, that he provided testimony that, generally speaking, the wetlands function as a conveyance of stormwater flow during high rain events and probably some seasonality to it. But generally speaking, they were of low ecological significance and integrity. So when I first got to the site and I walked around, I primarily focused on where the area of fill had occurred. Wanted to kind of establish where the original wetland boundary was placed so I could see how much fill was put in place, what would need to be taken out, what would need to be restored. Kind of one of the things that I keyed into first was I noticed in the corner where most of the fill was, in the southwest corner immediately adjacent to the road, there were a whole bunch of elm trees that looked like they were dead and dying. This looked like, a condition that was existing prior to the placement of the fill. And then looking, on the opposite end of the spectrum into the wetland boundary, there were some sugar maples, which have an affinity for drier soils. Those are doing well. So, you know, the first thing I did was I poked some holes through the actual fill into the native subsoil underneath of it. And after extracting several auger samples, I started to question the accuracy of the original delineation. It's a tough area to delineate, very stony, probably very thick understory. You know, being, you know, if you go there in a dry time of year, it could be hard to see, you know, what foot's in and what foot's out of the wetland. So because I was seeing some areas that, you know, may have been on the margin of being wet versus not being wet, and obviously that would have an effect on restoration activities that you would recommend. I reached out to Davison Environmental, who Mr. Klein is now associated with. He's semi-retired and he's available on a limited basis. So I had Matt Davison from Davison Environmental meet me out on site, and we went through the conditions that were on the site, and he and I together augured up and down through that fill layer into the wetland boundaries. And what we were really finding is underneath and along the 2014 delineated boundary, and in the area where the fill was placed, immediately under that fill is a very thick A horizon. And for the types of soils that are out there, when you are dealing with a thick, dark surface layer, you need to have certain soil morphology characteristics present to be considered a wetland. Specifically, you need to start seeing some redoxomorphic features within the upper 12 inches that would designate that there's soil saturation for a minimum of 2 weeks during the growing season. And in their absence, I started to question the boundary. So Mr. Davison and I went through and we refined the boundary somewhat. And you know, what we were finding was the Lamberts had, in most instances, had filled very close to the wetland boundary, but did not encroach into what I consider the wetland proper. And there's some graphics in my report that I forwarded that kind of illustrate right now, while I'm still in the draft form here, of what the actual boundary looks like. So on the sketch that you have in front of you, the original delineation is a thin black line. I highlighted it as the 2014 Klein delineation. So in the south corner here, moving east towards Pond Street, you know, essentially the delineation, you know, followed the edge of the property line and then followed the edge of the roadside. You know, irregardless of what the original delineation was, it still wouldn't have affected the general layout of the lot. We probably still would have had the house situated over here. The activities that occurred would still be a violation of the regulations, as you know, all of the lot is within an upland review area. So the filling within the upland review area, the clearing of vegetation, those would all still have been regulated activities. The establishment or the refinement of the wetland boundary was simply for having a more accurate representation of the actual field conditions out there, and to help us designate replanting zones so that we know what vegetation will be most successful where we plant it. So the red line is where myself and Mr. Davison came to a concurrence on. There's a slight break in slope. Under here, you start seeing more of the traditional glade matrix right underneath the topsoil layer. So we were very comfortable with our refinement of the wetland boundary in that area. I'm in development of a finalized plan that I hope to have for the next wetlands meeting that will more accurately depict that. But for right now, for a graphic, this is generally what it looks like out there. Let's see. You know, not to downplay what's out there, but so essentially what I wanted to show was, if we could scroll back up to the first photograph. So here you can see, generally speaking, the fill that was placed out there was a very sandy fill that ranges from, say, 6 inches and tapers down to about 1 inch, where it starts to blend back into the grade, into the landscape. You can see there's in a general, this is an example of a typical soil profile through there. We have about 2 inches of sandy fill, and then we immediately go into this dark A horizon that is roughly about 8 inches plus thick. Immediately underneath that, if we can go to photo number 2, we have this basically this very dark sandy loam. It's kind of all intermingled. Our thought process out there was that likely during the construction of Pond Street itself in the early stages of this development, which dates back probably to the 50s or 60s, this is kind of the overburden or material that was cast to the side during the construction of the road. As we got farther down the soil profile, we started seeing lots of things that they call HTM for human transported materials, a lot of broken brick, buried woody debris, stuff like that. Indications that this was an area that had historic disturbance. It's an area of historic fill, and it's all dark material. So it's a challenging delineation of a site, and you know, I'm not here to question the credibilities of Mr. Klein because he is a fine soil scientist. But you know, we did have this little discrepancy, and that's why I reached out to his firm. So, you know, what this means in terms of the restoration plan, if we can go to page 6, there's a photograph there. This is kind of a visual simulation of the conditions today. So the blue line kind of delineates the boundary of the fill that was placed on the site. You can see that grass has been well established, which, you know, I was pleased to see given how sandy the fill material is. But it took well to the site. The site's stabilized, which I think is important. And you can see there's several tree stumps kind of in the background of that blue delineated area. They're the remnants of the trees that were taken down. You know, one of my recommendations is not to pull those stumps out. Maybe for safety reasons, they could stump grind them, but certainly not to come in and disturb the material any farther than it has been. The red dashed line is an approximation based off the photograph of where the wetland boundary that we had refined out there is currently. And then you can kind of see where those rocks are just in front of it. That's kind of the stream, not those rocks, I'm sorry, the other rocks, right, those ones. That's kind of more of where the swale is. So it's a narrow, the wetlands narrow down and taper down before they head to the drain pipe along the road that conveys flow off-site. In the understory that was cleared, we're starting to see a lot of early emergent species coming up. There were some minor ruts noted within the wetlands and within the upland review area, but nothing of significance. There's been no significant change of elevations on the property as a result of the work outside of the area that was filled. Within the wetlands proper, as they've been redelineated, we're dealing with vegetation removal that occurred in the shrub stratum, a couple of trees that were cut down. They appear to be some smaller saplings and hemlocks that may have been cut based off of the remnants of the tree stumps that were left behind. And the channel itself, as it comes down to this flat area, starts to get a little bit more poorly defined. And one of the things we'll see in the recommended recommendations that I think is most paramount is reestablishing that channel for the long-term improvements of the site. I think we have a lot of good opportunity here to enhance the water quality features of this area. So I think ultimately we'll wind up with a better functioning wetland. One of my first recommendations would be to stabilize the area for this upcoming winter. We're getting pretty late into the season. I have a couple other mitigation projects I'm working on. Just getting the necessary materials is becoming a challenge later on in the year with plant stock. So my recommendation is Mrs. Lambert on site has about 14 bales of hay. And while there's not a significant erosion and sediment control risk present on the site currently, you know, it'd be wise to just evenly spread the hay bales out within the area that's been disturbed, just to add some extra measure of protection. We had, I laid out in this narrative here 19 recommendations for restoring the wetlands. But, you know, in a nutshell, what I'm proposing, there's a lot of, you know, boilerplate stuff in there. But mostly it is to not cut any additional tree stumps. The primary thing that I think is of the most importance is the establishment of the swale in the lower stretch. This can largely be accomplished with hand tools. We're not talking about a high energy site here. The swale area that's undisturbed higher up in the landscape is generally very shallow. We're talking, you know, a 1 foot to a 2 foot wide swale that's, you know, 6 inches in depth. We don't have a deeply incised channel here, so this is something that could be easily recreated. The idea would be to reform basically the lower 50 feet of that channel, basically put down a erosion control and restoration seed mix. Then on top of that, we would put a biodegradable erosion control blanket on top of that and stake that in. And then through that erosion sediment control blanket, we would punch in about 100 plugs of herbaceous vegetation to really kind of bring that area back up and improve the filtering capacity of it, basically make like a bioswale. And then within the wetlands proper, with the new defined wetlands, we would plant some new shrubs, 3 to 4 foot tall containers. We had called out some spice bush and silky dogwood, which were kind of the natural recruitments of what's occurring on site higher up in the landscape. Obviously, we do have some concern about, you know, burning bush creeping back in. And, you know, as part of the monitoring period, we would monitor for those encroachments. I just wanted to kind of temper the expectations of the commission, because burning bush is so prevalent around the surrounding areas, that, you know, our focus of eradication would be solely within this small area of containment that was disturbed. We weren't going to go chasing burning bush, you know, all around the property higher up. I just don't think it would be feasible to eradicate it. We're proposing a conservation seed mix within, we'll call it the riparian zone, kind of outside of the channel. And then we're proposing to plant, in addition to the 6 native shrubs within the wetlands, kind of along the blue dashed boundary of the limits of fill, I would recommend planting some native shrubs in this area also, just to prevent any kind of further encroachment. You know, my thought, and after discussions with Davis and Environmental, was to keep the fill that was placed on site for a couple of reasons. One, it was not placed within a wetland proper. 2, it's stabilized, and it doesn't appear to be negatively affecting the wetland resources from a hydrology standpoint. You know, the unintended benefit of providing this space would likely, because it's usable, would prevent future encroachments possibly elsewhere on the property. There really isn't a lot of usable land on the property from a, you know, an enjoyment standpoint. You know, the intent of this was to provide a safe play area for her children outside, and you know, it's somewhat accomplished. I'm sure it's not exactly what they wanted, but you know, I think at the end of the day, the encroachment thankfully didn't go any farther than it did, because it would have started to cause adverse or negative effect on the capacity of the wetlands. So that's it in a nutshell of what we're looking at, and we're hoping to finalize our plan within the next couple weeks here, and certainly, you know, look to any comment or concerns from the commission and or from town staff. If anyone has any questions for me.
Oh, we'll find out shortly. David?
I guess just one thing. I was just wondering if this isn't going to be done until, you know, next spring. is the existing swale, is that going to be able to handle the next spring runoff before you get to really do the improvements?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, there's still the remnants of the swale there, and not a tremendous amount of water flows through here to begin with. The part of the swale that's been temporarily disturbed is not a very long stretch. It's probably less than 20 feet, and that will just naturally reform itself, through the spring here.
Okay, I guess that's all I have.
Robert?
Thanks, Ian. That your work plan and overview was very helpful. I do have two questions actually for Shannon. One is the area that is shown on the photo that we're looking at right here in blue was originally shown as wetlands, correct?
Correct.
And we have the reassessment now by Ian. Do we need to amend our wetland map procedurally?
Well, the wetland maps, so our wetland maps don't get updated. So, with these applications, so Bruce had asked the same question, and he had asked it with respect to the as-built survey for the property, but the mapping does not get updated and historically has not, so that predates my arrival. But my thought is, even from an as-built standpoint, I would rather the time and energy be placed with the planting and the restoration work rather than a survey or redelineating this line. We can add this, make sure it's part of the file. We can attach it physically to the as-built survey, both our electronic copy and our hard copy. And I think that would be perhaps our most appropriate and cost-effective way of managing this.
Sorry to interject. For what it's worth, I did use a sub-foot accuracy GPS unit to locate the wetland boundary that we flagged. So I certainly could provide a shape file or whatever to the town, if not in a formal capacity, to put on whatever regulatory maps the town has, just for future planning purposes also.
Okay.
That'd be easy enough to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to take too much time on that issue, but I'm also thinking, because unfortunately we deal with a fair number of encroachment issues, what's the best way to reconcile the file? We're either going to authorize the fill of a wetland or, as we just talked about, potentially amend the map. So I'm glad you've already considered and looked into that with staff. Shannon, I accept that as a good response. And was there any further discussion about the status of the construction bond for the property?
It is currently still being held. There have been no further requests for its release, but we cannot legally release it to the homeowner for restoration either. So we can hold it. So unless the homeowner chooses to take legal action outside of this umbrella, other than continuing to hold it, we can't release it to her for restoration purposes.
Thank you, Shannon. Those are the only questions and comments I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Mark?
I have no comments. The report by Ian was quite thorough and informative. Thank you.
Ed?
I'm guessing he's muted. Hey, Ned, unmute
Are
yourself.
you on mute?
On the new J.
You're 4 for 4.
Yeah, I think that the report is good, and I kind of agree with the thought that the small area in between the edge of the roadway and the stream, I don't know how much wetland value is there to it, as long as we protect the area against, the revised wetland area and can protect the stream and provide for a better runoff. I think it would be a good plan. That's all I have.
Jay?
I have nothing except to say easy, Ned.
Guy?
No questions.
I don't particularly have any questions either. The one I do have though for Shannon is if we're going forward with this and one of the recommendations is to have the property owner go in and stabilize the area with hay bales, do we need to authorize that to take place? Because I think we basically told them they can't do anything, correct?
Correct. There's a cease and desist, so we can authorize this limited work because it sounds, and Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't sure with the recreate the channel, if that was now or in the spring. And to disperse the hay bales, you're meaning to break apart the hay bales and cast the hay on,
Yes,
not stack the hay bales.
correct. They have 14 hay bales there. They're kind of sitting off to the side. They're going to rot away by springtime.
Yep.
And while there's early emergent species kind of providing ground cover now, you know, when I was talking with Matt Davison on the site, I kind of pointed over there. I said, those would be good use of those hay bales while they're just sitting here, is to spread them out and, you know, help the area out even that much more.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I assumed that you were referring to spread them out. Yeah, because, I mean, I know that we don't have a final plan in yet, but I will say that based on what I'm seeing, to me, it looks pretty good. And I also think it's something that's not going to create a very major or significant burden on the property owner. And it ultimately may help them with their property too. So, yeah, I like what you've done on this so far, and I'd like to see that we go ahead and at least release the cease and desist order, at least to allow them to spread the hay. Maybe get that done in the next week or so that it's down and it's in place. And then I'm assuming, so what we're probably talking, we have one meeting in November, right?
Correct. November 4th and then December.
So I'm assuming, Ian, that if you're talking about 3-4 weeks, you're really talking about for our December meeting?
Yes, I could have the finalized plan for the December meeting. And in the interim, if released, you know, I would ideally like them to spread that hay now.
Yeah.
And I could certainly include a follow-up to town staff, some documentation, just taking some photos and a quick email to say that that work was completed.
Okay. How's that sound, Shannon?
I think that's fine. I think I'll leave it a little open-ended. We'll do a release to allow for winter stabilization and obviously the disbursement of the hay bales, but we'll leave it for winter stabilization. So that way if Ian sees something else that needs to be tweaked, they can do that and react to it without fear of being in a violation situation. But it'll allow a little bit of latitude, but not a free release of all cease and desist activities.
Okay, so I think that sounds like a plan.
Okay.
All right.
With respect to the quantity of plantings, and I guess, and I realize Ian hasn't finalized the plan. In listening to it, it seemed like a fairly high quantity of plantings, and I'm trying to moderate from a cost standpoint, and perhaps I don't know if anyone else had any thoughts as you either read his report or listened to it, or do we want to just see the plan and see how it works out once we see the plan in December?
I mean, I'll chime in. I mean, whatever numbers are put down, I know he's coming up with a proposal, but until we actually see how it lays out, you know, I don't know if we need more or less. to see how it plays out. So let's see what the plan is. We can discuss it at the December meeting and then work something out, because the work's not going to be done until April and May anyway.
Correct. Okay, fair enough.
Does anybody else have a different opinion?
No, that's reasonable.
Sounds good to me as well.
And me.
Okay.
Same here.
All right.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, show cause hearing 1179 Farmington Avenue.
All right.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Attorney Galsky was on. I'm not sure if he's still on. Oh, he's there. So Attorney Galsky is still on.
I am.
So what's taken place is, obviously at the last meeting, we selected the consultant, Ed Pollack. So I signed the contract, that's all set. I did follow up with Malone and McBroom as well and spoke to Megan as opposed to just issuing an email, and I had a nice conversation with her as well. The third-party review fee has already been remitted by the property owner, so that is here at Town Hall for paying as invoices as they come through. I've spoken to Ed, and we've kind of both collectively have a game plan. He's reviewed most of the documents that were placed on the SharePoint site, and we have a meeting set up to meet George Logan out at the property at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I'll be there for, a cursory review. I wasn't going to stay for their entire site walk as the two of them go through the property. I've done it a handful of times with George already, so I was going to get everybody oriented and then for the most part let them proceed. And then Ed is probably going to go back a second time on his own just to do a more thorough evaluation, do some test holes on his own with his auger, just take a general look around on his own, and then put together a summary for the commission. And then at that point, once an initial summary has been provided to the commission, then it's probably then best to do a site walk with the commission.
You start with the machine.
Recognizing that it could be, it possibly could be December at that point, and we may or may not be tackling snow, and this may, a commission site walk may have to wait till spring. But it kind of, from a timing standpoint, we'll do what we can. But that's what we may be dealing with depending upon what Mother Nature hands us. But that's the general thought process. So Ed has been very reactive and willing to get going. And George obviously as well, since we've got the meeting set up for next week or tomorrow, excuse me. So hopefully we continue to see decent forward progress on this. But that's really where we stand at this point in time.
If you do the site walk in the spring, I should be able to make it.
We can always do a second one. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, or if maybe Attorney Galsky, do you have anything to add to? Did I miss anything?
I do not, no. I think it's moving along as anticipated.
Okay. So hopefully in November we'll have a little bit more update. Whether or not Ed joins us at the November meeting will depend on whether or not there's anything noteworthy to share. Otherwise, it'll be the December meeting. Again, being mindful that we specifically contracted in attendance at 3 meetings. So we just want to make sure it's a worthwhile use of his time when he's with us. Okay. Anybody have any questions regarding any of that?
I don't.
Nope.
No, not me.
Okay, that's it. That's all there is for an update on this one for tonight.
Very informative, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. So we've got next.
Next on the agenda is what you're giving away in your life for next year.
Yes, our promise. Our promise is for next year.
A couple highlighted dates.
So are these some alternative dates that we have on a couple of occasions?
Yes, I think September, Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, the 15th is Yom Kippur.
So the 15th is Yom Kippur. So we could move to the 22nd if the commission so chooses, and then the site walk just moves accordingly depending upon which date we take. But
I appreciate that. Thank you.
okay. So Jay, you'd prefer the
It
22nd?
looks like the site visit should be September, not August.
Well, this first one is August, the August 29th, and then, yeah, we could put
Oh,
September,
okay.
September,
Yeah.
because this meeting September 1st, the site visit would be August 29th. So, but
Yeah,
you're
just plug in the September.
September there,
No, there's no question.
okay. So is there
Then-
a preference to go ahead with the 22nd?
And then for October, you'd also need to put in the October.
Okay, yeah, we've got a couple of them. We can
Yeah.
pick that. And it's,
Okay.
yeah,
Where there's, yeah.
yeah, we can.
Looks like everything was moved down.
All right. So on this, do we need a motion to approve the
Mhm.
2021 schedule as submitted to the commission?
Well, it's as revised for the September date, correct?
Correct.
September 22nd.
It's
Okay,
September 22nd. And subsequently, September 19th for this site visit, correct?
correct.
Okay. So can I get a motion to approve the 2021 meeting schedule as modified?
So moved.
Is there a second?
You guys are too fast.
All right, Jay.
Yeah, I did.
Was that a second, Jay, or were you just complaining we're too fast?
Someone else seconded before me, I think, but if not, I'll do the second. And you're not too fast. I'm just trying to annoy Ned a little bit more than I already have.
You can never annoy me,
You
Jay.
got a motion to approve the calendar for 2021? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Put it up on the door so you know when we have to be here. Anything on planners report?
No,
Okay.
I've got, yeah, no, construction sites that are making Bruce and I a little crazy, but we got it. We got a bunch of people that aren't happy with us, but I guess that's, if people aren't happy with us, we're doing our job. We just got
Okay.
off a whole bunch of Christmas card lists, that's for sure.
So if there's nothing else on that, up next to the minutes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of October 7th, 2020 of the Wetlands and also the October 17th, 2020 site walk notes?
So moved, Stanchion.
Is there a second?
Table second.
Any comments, corrections, questions? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, so at 9:09, close the Wetlands Commission meeting and commence the Conservation Commission meeting. So Land Acquisition Committee report.
Yeah. Is that right open?
I didn't make the meeting.
Yeah. So then,
We didn't have a majority, so weren't able to do much.
correct. Liz, there wasn't a quorum, but they just did a brief update. So Liz did just a brief summary for us based on that. And obviously there wasn't anything voted on. There was no executive committee. But there was just some old business items that they cleared up with respect to 1507 and 1509 Farmington Avenue, which is across the street. And basically I did not, what the summary is that I did not bring this to the Conservation Commission to have this added to the list because we've had active, a third party had requested it being added to the list, not the current property owner. And the current property owner is actively marketing the site and has done a great deal of due diligence. So I felt it was conflicting interest and was not gonna be beneficial to any of us moving ahead. So it's just hanging there for now. And certainly it's an opportunity if it ever presents itself, but right now the current property owner is looking to actively market the site for residential, which is zone 4, and there have been homes on it previously. The trail on Mountain Road has been relocated, so all that work has been done. The Wollenberg property was closed on in July, and there's 3 other properties that they're looking to amend the maps to, I believe, showed maps and noted that both listings are part of subdivision that are now owned by multiple owners. And so they're basically, we've got a couple of properties at Meadow and Judson that have some conservation or adjacent to town land, had been on the open space list, and now have subsequently been subdivided and may be utilized as residential. And obviously once those go through, then they come off the land acquisition list. Same with these at the intersection of Eli and Old Mountain Road. These are all on the market for single family homes, and we've actually received phone calls on a number of those lots. And of course, we're familiar with Main Gate, and the subdivision, the Mylars have been filed, and my guess is obviously the timing of the pandemic has put this on hold. But the Mylars have been filed, all the engineering comments, et cetera, have been addressed. So as soon as they start pulling building permits, then that also comes off the acquisition list. So that's really all the updates there are. Any questions?
Nope.
No.
Okay. And that's all I have. I don't, from a conservation standpoint, I don't have any planners report. We'll get the numbers from the household hazardous waste collection day here within, probably for the November meeting. When I get the numbers in, I'll share them with everyone. And bulk waste is going, it's very evident that bulk waste is going on this week. And it's very evident that everyone has been home for the last 6 months, because I have never, ever seen our curbs look like they have this past 2 weeks with bulk waste out at the curb. So this should be an interesting tally this year. It'll be interesting too to see what our mattress count is this time around. So.
Yeah, but just think how much doesn't get picked up because of people driving their pickup trucks up and down the streets.
Yeah, there's been plenty of that too. Believe me, we get the calls about people. Yeah, never mind. Yes, there's been all on both ends.
People posting.
Well, Robert and I have had discussions about this in the past. Once it goes out to the street, you don't want it. It's solid waste. So
Right.
I'm glad when it does go somewhere else other than the landfill. So good for those that pick it up.
Absolutely, right? One man's trash is another man's treasure, something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so if there's nothing on planners report, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of October 7th, 2020 for the Conservation Commission meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, statute.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 7th? Any questions, comments?
So
Hearing
moved.
none, those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, and I guess we can call this at 9:15.